The match looked finished. Alexandra Eala stood behind the baseline, the desert sun hanging low over Indian Wells, and the scoreboard said something that every tennis player fears. 4 games all in the final set, and she had just been broken. Momentum was gone. The crowd could feel it. Even her opponent, Dayana Yastremska, looked ready to close the door. But here's the thing about Alexandra Eala. Just when it looks like she's out, she becomes the most dangerous player on the court. And what happened in the next 3 games didn't just win her the match. It may have just set the stage for one of the most fascinating showdowns of this tournament, because waiting in the next round is Coco Gauff. And if you think this is just another early round match at Indian Wells, you're missing the real story. This is about revenge, growth, and one of the most underrated mentalities in tennis right now, because 1 month ago, Coco Gauff absolutely demolished Alexandra Eala, but something has changed since then. To understand why this moment matters, we have to rewind to the start of this match. Indian Wells is known for its brutal conditions, the slow courts, the heavy air, the long rallies that push players physically and mentally. For Alexandra Eala, this was her first match in the tournament this year, and right away she was thrown into a battle. Dayana Yastremska isn't the kind of opponent who lets you settle into rhythm. She attacks early, hits big, takes risks, and for long stretches of this match, it worked. The first set turned into a tactical chess match disguised as a power duel, both players trading momentum, both pushing each other to the edge. But Eala showed something we've been seeing more and more from her in 2026. Patience. Instead of trying to overpower Yastremska, she absorbed the pressure, waited for the right moment, and slowly turned the tide. She edged out the first set 7-5, and that alone said something important, because the Alexandra Eala we used to see a couple years ago might have rushed, might have forced shots, might have cracked under the pace. This version of Eala is different, but tennis rarely follows a straight script. The second set flipped completely. Yastremska came out swinging, hitting with urgency, pushing Eala deep behind the baseline and forcing errors. Suddenly the momentum had changed again. The Ukrainian took the second set 6-4. And now the match was exactly where players either collapse or reveal who they really are. The final set began like a storm slowly building. Games were tight. Every rally stretched longer. Every point carried more tension. And then came the moment that looked like the end.April games all. Eala's serve faltered. A couple of aggressive returns from Yastremska. A tight forehand error. Breakpoint. Yastremska converted. Just like that, the scoreboard said 5-4, and now Eala was staring at the possibility of losing a match she had fought so hard to control. This is where the story could have ended. But Alexandra Eala doesn't see moments like this the same way most players do. Instead of panic, she gets sharper. Instead of frustration, she gets calmer. And the next 3 games proved it. First came the immediate response. Eala stepped onto the return. Game with a completely different energy. Her movement sharpened. Her shot selection became fearless. She broke right back. The crowd could feel it shifting again. Now the tension was fully back on Yastremska. Then came the most important game of the match. Serving at 5-all, Eala had to hold. And this is where her mentality showed up in the clearest way. Got no rush shots. No panic swings. Just controlled aggression. She held serve. 6-5. And now, all the pressure had flipped completely. Yastremska stepped up to serve to stay in the match. But the energy was different now. Eala had momentum belief, and the crowd behind her. One deep return forced an error. A long rally ended with a perfectly timed backhand. Suddenly it was match point. And when the final ball flew long, Alexandra Eala didn't explode into wild celebration. She simply clenched her fist. Because for her, moments like this are not surprises anymore. They're part of who she is becoming. The final score told the story. 7-5. 4-6. 7-5. A comeback built on nerve, patience, and belief. But the match itself wasn't the most interesting part of this story. The most interesting part is why this keeps happening with Alexandra Eala. If you followed her career closely, you've probably noticed something unusual. She might not always dominate matches with power. She might not always look like the most explosive player on the court, But when things get chaotic, when matches reach the breaking point, she gets stronger. And that's not just an observation. It's something she has talked about openly. Back in December, after winning gold for the Philippines at the Southeast Asian Games, Eala was asked a simple question. What is her biggest strength? Her answer surprised some people. She didn't say her forehand. She didn't say her backhand. She didn't say speed or power. She said her mindset. And the way she explained it revealed a lot about how she approaches tennis. She said it's actually very hard to define what a champion's mentality really means, because every situation in tennis is different. But she believes the one thing she can control more than anything else is how she thinks during difficult moments, how she reacts to obstacles, how she processes pressure, and she credits a lot of that mentality to the values her family gave her growing up. That foundation, according to her, is what separates her from other players. At the time, some fans probably saw those comments as typical athlete talk. Every player says, mindset matters. But 2026 has turned those words into something more convincing. Because if you look at Eala's season so far, one pattern keeps repeating. She refuses to disappear in big moments. Let's break down what that season has actually looked like. The year started in Auckland at the ASB Classic. Eala reached the semi-finals, pushing deep into the tournament before losing a tight 3-set match against Wong Sin Yiyu, 7-5, 5-7, 4-6. Even in defeat, the match showed how competitive she had become against higher-ranked players. Then came the Australian Open. That tournament didn't go the way she wanted. She lost in the first round to Alicia Parks. But what stood out was the fight in the second set after dropping the first set 6-2. Again, resilience. Next came the Philippine Women's Open. A quarterfinal run there ended against Camila Osorio. Then the Abu Dhabi Open. And this is where one of the most dramatic matches of her season happened. Facing Alexandra Eala, Eala looked completely out of the match in the final set. She was down 1-5. Most players mentally check out in that situation, but somehow, she didn't. Point by point, she chipped away. Game by game, the impossible started looking possible. She forced a tiebreak, and then she won the match. 2-6, 6-4, 7 spikes. It was the kind of comeback that players remember for years. Some people called it the match that defined her season, and maybe they were right, because after that, something about her confidence looked different. Later in February came another test, this time against Jasmine Paolini, and once again the match delivered drama. Eala served for the match and got broken. That moment crushes many players mentally, but she didn't let it spiral. She reset, fought through a tense tiebreak, and closed the match 6-1, 7-6. Another example of the same pattern. Pressure arrives, and Alexandra Eala responds with calm. Which brings us back to the upcoming match everyone is watching. Coco Gauff. Because if you look at their most recent meeting, it wasn't close. They played in Dubai just last month, and Gauff dominated. 6-0, 6-2. It was the kind of scoreline that usually creates a clear hierarchy between players. But tennis changes fast. Confidence changes fast. And the version of Eala arriving at Indian Wells might not be the same player Gauff faced in Dubai. There's also something interesting about matchups in tennis. Sometimes a lopsided scoreline hides deeper potential. Players learn from those losses. They analyze what went wrong, they adjust tactics, and they come back smarter. For Eala, that Dubai loss might actually be useful. She saw firsthand what Gauff's pace feels like. She experienced the intensity, and now she gets another chance. But before we talk about what that match could look like, there's another piece of the story worth mentioning. Because not everything at Indian Wells went perfectly for Eala. On Saturday, she stepped onto the court again. This time for doubles. Partnering with Iva Jovic, the young duo had shown promise earlier in the season, even reaching the semi-finals at the ASB Classic in Auckland. But their campaign at Indian Wells ended quickly. They faced Hailey Baptiste and Jelena Ostapenko, and from the beginning, the match tilted heavily against them. The biggest problem was second-serve performance. Eala and Jovic managed to win only 20% of their second-serve points. At this level of tennis, that number makes winning extremely difficult. The result was a straight sets loss. 6-2. 6-2. For Baptiste and Ostapenko, the win sends them into a fascinating next round against Mira Andreeva and Victoria Mboko. But for Eala, the doubles exit might actually simplify her focus. Now her entire attention turns to the singles draw, and that means preparing for Coco Gauff. This is where things get really interesting, because Gauff enters the match with clear advantages. She has more experience at the highest level. She has a Grand Slam title, and historically, she has handled Eala comfortably. But momentum inside a tournament can change everything. Eala is arriving with a comeback victory that reinforced her biggest strength: belief. And if this match turns into another pressure situation, that belief could become a serious weapon. The tactical battle itself could be fascinating. Gauff's speed and defensive ability are among the best in tennis. She can extend rallies until opponents break down, but Eala's patience and shot variety might actually create longer exchanges. If she can stay calm and avoid rushing points, the match could become much more competitive than their previous meeting. Another key factor will be the return game. In Dubai, Gauff completely controlled the baseline exchanges early in rallies. If Eala can neutralize those first strikes, she might be able to stretch the points, and once rallies extend, confidence becomes everything. There's also the psychological angle. Players who are known for comebacks often carry a unique aura. Opponents know that even when they're leading, the match might not be over. That pressure alone can shift momentum. So, the question heading into this match is simple. Can Alexandra Eala turn her mentality into a genuine upset? Or will Coco Gauff remind everyone why she's one of the biggest stars in tennis? Either way, the story unfolding around Eala is becoming impossible to ignore. A 20-year-old player from the Philippines, steadily building a reputation as one of the toughest competitors in the sport. Not through overwhelming power, not through flashy dominance, but through something harder to measure: mental strength. And if that mindset continues developing the way it has in 2026, we might be watching the early chapters of a much bigger rise, because tennis history is filled with players who built their careers on moments exactly like this. Matches where they refused to lose. Matches where belief outlasted pressure. Matches where the scoreboard said one thing but the player's mentality said something else. Alexandra Eala just added another one of those moments to her story. And now, the next chapter is waiting. Coco Gauff on the other side of the net. A rematch. A chance to prove how far she has come. So here's the question I want to hear your thoughts on. After watching Alexandra Eala's incredible fight back and the mindset she keeps showing in big moments, do you think she has what it takes to shock Coco Gauff this time? Or will Gauff's experience and power be too much again? Let me know what you think. And if you love deep tennis stories like this, stay tuned, because the drama at Indian Wells is just getting started. This is RedDust Report, where we break down the biggest moments, the rising stars, and the stories shaping the world of tennis.